I left my mother alone in the hospital overnight to go on a date. The nurse told me she didn't make it through the night. I returned to an empty house and a note on the fridge, "You missed more than her last breath. Look under the bed." What I found there changed everything. I left my mother to die alone in a hospital so I could go on a date. I've never said that out loud until now. It's something I've tried to bury, but it keeps crawling back up, especially when I walk past a mirror and see the men who made that choice. I was exhausted. She'd been battling lung cancer for almost 3 years. I moved back to Baltimore from Philly when she got diagnosed. At first, I thought I could manage both, keep my remote job, help with doctor visits, be there for her emotionally. But it got harder. She needed help getting dressed, eating, sometimes even walking. I had to be on July 24th. It's a level of burnout that doesn't show until it breaks you in half. So when Cassie messaged me and asked if I wanted to finally meet in person, I didn't think about it long. I wanted to feel like a person again, not just a caregiver. I checked with the nurse at St. Agnes. Mom was stable. She'd been admitted earlier that week for observation because of a chest infection, but her vitals were good. They had her on oxygen and said she was resting. I told myself it would be one night. I'd be back in the morning. I didn't tell her I was going out. I kissed her on the forehead before I left and told her I loved her. She was half asleep but she squeezed my hand. I didn't know that would be the last time. Cassie lived in D.C., and we picked a spot in Laurel to meet halfway. We had dinner, then drinks. I didn't check my phone all night. When I finally looked, around 1 a.m., I saw a missed call from the hospital. I told myself it was nothing. That I'd call in the morning. I drove home the next day feeling better than I had in months. That feeling didn't last. There were 3 voicemails from the nurse. She died around 2 a.m. in her sleep. Peaceful, they said. But the nurse also said, "She kept asking for you." Over and over. I drove to the hospital immediately. By the time I got there, they'd already moved her body. Her room was empty. I sat on the edge of the bed staring at the 4 pump still hanging there like it was waiting for her to come back. A nurse came in and handed me a bag. It had her wedding ring, her rosary, and a folded note that just said, "Be brave." I should have been there. I should have held her hand. I should have done 1,000 things differently. I drove home, parked in the driveway, and sat there for a long time. The house felt wrong. Quiet in a way I hadn't felt before. No hum of the TV, no coughing from the other room. Just a void. Then I saw the note. It was taped to the fridge with duct tape, like someone wanted to make sure I didn't miss it. Written in black Sharpie, "You missed more than her last breath. Look under the bed." It wasn't her handwriting. I knew that right away. The strokes were heavier. It felt angry. I almost ignored it, thinking maybe it was just my brain making up things from the grief. But I went into her bedroom and got down on my knees. Under the bed was a plastic file box. I pulled it out and opened the lid. There were folders inside. Dozens. Some labeled with names I knew, mine, my sister Janice, my uncle Mike. But one stood out, David L. Owens. That name punched the air out of my lungs. I hadn't heard it in years. David Owens used to come around when I was in high school. He wore designer suits, gold cufflinks, always drove a different car. Said he was helping Mom with investments. I never liked him. He was too smooth. Too slick. After Dad died, Mom leaned on him for everything financial. Pensions, life insurance, bills. I remember hearing her on the phone late at night, always sounding nervous afterward. She never told me much, just said David was helping. I opened the folder. Inside were years of documents. Bank transfers, emails she printed out, even photos of him taken by someone with a long-range lens. There was also a handwritten letter dated almost 2 years ago. It started with, "If you're reading this, I didn't get to tell you the truth." David Owens had drained my father's pension. Convinced Mom to move the life insurance into some tax shelter. Then he vanished. Changed his name to David Lowell, moved to Owings Mills, started over with our money. She tried to file charges, but nothing stuck. She hired a PI. She kept digging. Alone. While battling cancer. She didn't want me to carry that weight while she was dying. But she also didn't want him to get away with it. In that moment, everything inside me shifted. My grief turned sharp. Focused. This man didn't just steal money. He stole her safety. Her peace. My time with her. All those nights I could have been holding her hand instead of working, she was carrying this secret. And someone, maybe the nurse, maybe a friend, left that note on the fridge. Someone who knew the truth and wanted me to see it. I called a friend of mine from high school who's now in real estate. I asked him to run a name, David Lowell. Took him 2 days to get back to me. David owns a home in Owings Mills. 4-bed, 3.5 bath, gated community. Big yard. Lexus in the driveway. He didn't just escape justice. He built a life off our pain. I spent the next week going through everything in that box. Mom wasn't just collecting. She was preparing. There were maps. Timelines. Records of his phone numbers, aliases, even who he was dating. She wasn't dying in denial. She was trying to leave me a loaded gun. And I planned to pull the trigger. Not literally. I'm not going to kill him. But I'm going to destroy everything he built on our backs. He's going to wish I had just let it go. And when I'm done, he's going to know what it feels like to be left alone in the dark, wondering how it all went so wrong. The next few weeks, I stopped being myself. I didn't return calls. I ignored Janice when she texted about funeral plans. I barely touched food. I quit my job. None of that mattered anymore. My whole life narrowed to one thing, David Lowell. I drove by his house 3 times before I worked up the nerve to stop. He lived in one of those clean, sterile neighborhoods, everything HOA approved, 2-car garages, identical mailboxes. His house was 10 stucco with a red door. Lexus SUV in the driveway. A small garden out front with those little metal signs that say, protected by Safe Tech. He had a dog. Some kind of golden retriever. Fat and lazy, barely lifted its head when I walked past. I sat across the street in a borrowed car with tinted windows, watching. I needed to see his routine. He jogged every morning at 6:30 sharp. Wore a neon vest, wireless earbuds, ran like he didn't have a care in the world. Mondays he left for work at 8. Fridays he worked from home. He had a woman living with him, long dark hair, looked maybe late 30s. Not sure if she was a wife or girlfriend, but she wore a ring. They laughed together a lot. That laughter made me sick. At night, I went back through Mom's files. Found the name of the PI she hired. Local guy, retired cop. I paid him in cash to give me everything he had on David. Turns out he had even more than Mom knew. David had multiple shell companies. He was laundering money through consulting services that didn't exist. One of them used Mom's maiden name in the LLC. That detail snapped something inside me. I asked the PI what it would take to ruin him. Legally, financially, socially. He said, people like this don't break easy. But they break. You just have to hit them where they think they're safe. So I got to work. Step 1, I called the IRS hotline. Gave them every shell company name, tax ID, and fake invoice I could find in the files. I left it all anonymous. That part was easy. Step 2, I found out where his girlfriend worked. A dental clinic in Towson. I left an envelope for her at the front desk with a copy of a wire transfer showing David paying another woman's rent in Alexandria, 3 months' worth. Same woman he used to show off in old Facebook photos back when he was still David Owens. Step 3, I wrote a letter, actually, several letters. One to his current employer, one to the Maryland Attorney General, one to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Each packed with copies of forged documents from his fake, financial services, company. Again, all anonymous. All just enough to light fires. But that wasn't the part that kept me up at night. What kept me up was the letter I found at the bottom of the box. One I hadn't seen the first time. It was sealed, in an envelope with no name, just the words, "For when you're ready." I opened it at 3 a.m. one night when I couldn't sleep. It was written by Mom. Longer than the others. She wrote about a time I was 10 years old. How I told her I hated her because she wouldn't let me stay up late to watch a movie. She said I cried and screamed, and the next day I brought her a flower from the neighbor's garden and said I was sorry. She said, "You've always wanted to fix things when they break. But some things don't get fixed. Some things just get exposed." Then she wrote this: "If you go down this path, do it with open eyes. Don't lie to yourself and call it justice if what you want is blood. And if you fall, fall knowing you stood for something." I sat there with that letter in my hand, tears running down my face, and I hated that she still understood me better than I understood myself. But it didn't stop me. Because the next morning, I found out David had a daughter. 13 years old. Same age I was when he first came into our lives. He posted a photo on LinkedIn of "Take Your Daughter to Work Day." His office, his smile, his girl grinning beside him, holding a Starbucks cup like she belonged there. And something broke in me. Not because of her. But because I realized this man had built a new life, with a new family, on top of the ashes of ours. He stole everything from my mother, from me, and now he got to play happy dad while we were left grieving in silence. I knew what I had to do next. But that next step would be ugly. And I wasn't sure if I'd still be able to look at myself when it was done. 2 weeks after I mailed the last of the anonymous letters, things started happening. The IRS didn't contact me, of course, but I knew they'd bitten. A neighbor of David's posted on a local community Facebook group about a suspicious government vehicle parked outside their gated entrance. Someone even shared a blurry photo of a guy in a suit knocking on David's door. Then the girlfriend disappeared from his social media. Her name was Trina. A week after I left that envelope at her clinic, she posted something vague on her private Instagram: "Some truths burn the whole house down. Let it burn." Her profile went dark after that. I assumed she left him. I assumed I'd done enough. I was wrong. Because a few days later, I came home and found a man sitting on my porch. Tall, built like he used to play college ball, clean-shaven. Late 50s. No smile. Black SUV parked at the curb. Maryland plates. He stood up slowly as I approached. "You're Jason, right?" he asked. I didn't answer. "I work for David Lowell." "You've been busy." Still, I said nothing. He reached into his jacket, real slow, and pulled out a phone. Not a gun. A phone. He held it out to me. "David wants to talk." I took the phone. David's voice came through calm, confident, like he still thought he had the upper hand. "You're going to stop this shit now, Jason. You don't want to go down the road you're headed. People get hurt. Mistakes get made." I said nothing. Then he added, "You think you know the full story? You don't. Your mom wasn't some victim." That got my blood boiling. "She was dying of cancer, and you drained her accounts," I snapped. "You left her with nothing while you built a life off stolen money." "You think she told you everything," he said. "She was in on it at first. She signed off on those transfers. She was going to flip it with me, buy into a high-yield fund. She just got scared when it tanked." That landed like a slap. I didn't know what to believe. "She told me you ran," I said. "I left because the SEC started sniffing around. I offered her a payout to stay quiet. She declined. That's on her." He paused. "I'm offering you the same thing. Walk away. You'll get a check. Nobody needs to know anything else." I handed the phone back to the man and went inside without a word. That night, I tore the house apart looking for something, anything, that would tell me the truth. I went back into the storage box. I found a second envelope taped under the lid. Sloppy. Like it had been added later. This one wasn't in Mom's handwriting. It was typed. It was a copy of a contract. Signed by Mom. A partnership agreement. Dated 14 years ago. It showed she agreed to invest $150,000 into a private fund David created. He hadn't lied. Not entirely. She was part of it in the beginning. But there was also a notarized addendum dated 2 years later, revoking her involvement, claiming he'd forged statements, and accusing him of coercion. It was more complicated than I thought. Mom had tried to grow the money after Dad died. Maybe she got desperate. Maybe she didn't ask enough questions. Maybe she did make a mistake at first. But David kept going after she pulled out. He drained more. Forged her signature. Hid assets. She might have walked into the fire. But he poured the gasoline and held the match. And now, he was trying to use her mistakes against me. He thought that'd make me back off. It didn't. It made everything feel personal again. But I knew one thing now: if I pushed harder, he'd push back. And people around me, Janice, even that PI, could get hurt. So I had to change tactics. Not just expose him. I had to trap him. And to do that, I'd have to get closer than I ever planned to. Getting close to David meant I had to stop thinking like a son and start thinking like him. Cold. Strategic. Detached. That meant not reacting. Not confronting him again. Just collecting, planning, executing. I took the contract Mom had signed and brought it to a friend of mine. She's a compliance officer for a financial firm. I told her I was helping an estate issue. She looked at it and said immediately, "This reeks of fraud. There's no clear disclosure language, no legitimate fund listed, and it looks like he used a dead fund's name to trick her. That's illegal, even if she signed." She walked me through how financial fraud cases are built. Where people usually screw up. She also gave me something better than advice: access to an insider who used to work at the SEC. He and I talked off the record. I laid out everything: the shell companies, the forged addendums, the anonymous tips I'd sent, even the PI's files. He listened, then said, "Get one recording. One direct admission. Doesn't have to be long. Then I'll take it to the right people." So I set the trap. I called David's assistant from a blocked number and claimed I was with a private consulting firm representing interested investors. I asked if David would be willing to discuss his legacy fund model from the early 2000s. A week later, I had a lunch meeting with him at a hotel restaurant in Hunt Valley. I wore glasses, grew out some scruff, dressed like a real estate guy. I used a fake name, Marcus Fields. He walked in like he always had, confident, expensive watch, that fake warmth in his smile. I hit record before I even sat down. We talked for 20 minutes about nothing. Then I steered the conversation toward old investment strategies and asked about how he handled risk back then, how he protected himself legally. He chuckled. Said, "Back then, you just needed a good notary and a client desperate enough to believe they were about to double their money." I kept the conversation going, got him to say more: how he salvaged failed investments by folding them into shell entities, how he created silence with settlements instead of trials. 36 minutes into the conversation, he said, "Some clients were bitter. One even tried to drag my name through court, but the papers never made it past the clerk. Timing's everything." He smiled when he said it. I left the restaurant, drove to a parking garage, emailed the file to the SEC contact and my PI. Then I just sat there with my head against the wheel. That night, I called Janice. Told her everything. About the money. The betrayal. What I'd done. What Mom had done. I expected her to scream. To say I was crazy. But she didn't. She cried for a long time, then said, "Mom would have hated this. But she also would have wanted it finished." I didn't hear anything official for 6 weeks. But then it all came crashing down. The SEC froze David's assets first. Then the IRS filed a civil suit for tax evasion. Trina, the ex-girlfriend, testified against him. So did a former business partner. The woman in Alexandria. She'd sued him 5 years ago and lost. But now she came forward again, this time with hard evidence. David was arrested at his house in front of his daughter. It made the local news. They didn't use the words con man or fraud king, but the tone was clear. His name was poisoned. His company collapsed. Every license he held was revoked. I drove past his house one last time about 2 months later. It was quiet. The Lexus was gone. His name was scraped off the mailbox. Foreclosure signs hung in the windows. I don't know where he is now. Probably in jail or waiting for sentencing. Doesn't matter. The money's gone. Most of it will never come back. The court might claw some back for victims, but I don't care about that anymore. I care that people know what he did. That my mom's name is cleared. That someone who thought he was untouchable got dragged into the light. As for me, I lost more than I ever thought I could. I missed her last breath. That's something I'll never undo, but I stood for her in the end. I carried her fight when she couldn't. I found her strength under that bed. She asked me to be brave, so I was, and I still am. Every day.